Calling to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage for August 1st, 2011. If the Secretary would please call the roll.
Nancy Pease. Jim Frederick.
Here.
Connie Yoshimura. Here. Art Isham.
Here.
Bruce Phelps. Stacy Dean.
Here.
Terry Parks.
Here.
Dana Pruse.
Here.
Richard Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay, if we'll now move on to the minutes for Monday, June 13th and Monday, July 11th. I take a positive motion for approval. Okay, been moved by Ms. Dean, seconded by Mr. Frederick. Are there any comments or changes to the minutes? Is there any objection? And the minutes are approved. Ms. Yoshimura, if you would please take care of disclosures this evening.
Okay. Commissioner Fredericks, do you have anything to disclose this evening?
No.
Commissioner Wilson?
No.
Commissioner Parks?
No.
Okay. Ms. Dean?
Yes. I have an interesting disclosure. My niece is David Hartman, the second case tonight, is the landlord of my niece. I don't know if that's relevant, but...
Thank you for that additional information. Most likely not, but thank you for the disclosure. Commissioner Pruse?
Well, I think so.
Okay.
On the first case with the Municipality of Anchorage, and Jerry Weaver, not Jerry Weaver, but Hanson, I do work for the municipality. It's bid work, projects, so I don't know if that's a conflict or not. So I'm presently working for the municipality on public works projects. And then on the second case, David Hartman has bid work to my company in the past. He's actually done some work in the past. He presently isn't doing any work, but he has done work for my company in the past as a subcontractor.
Commissioner Pruse, in the case of 2011-082, do you have a substantial part of the present action?
No.
Okay. Do you have a substantial financial interest or a substantive private interest in the matter?
No.
Okay. So you have no significant monetarily interest?
I do not.
Okay. Then I think it would be appropriate for you to continue. Do we need to take a vote?
Why don't we go ahead and take a vote anyway?
Okay. So in the matter of 2011-082, I would make a motion for Mr. Phelps to participate. Not Phelps, Pruse to participate.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Yoshimura. Is there a second?
I need a clarification, please. Was that for the first case, the second case, or both cases?
I think we should take one case at a time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Parks. Let's see. We've directed, let's see, Mr. Pruse to participate in 2011-082. Is there any objection? No objection, okay. Go ahead, Ms. Yoshimura.
Okay. And then in the case of 2011-085, I would make a positive motion for Commissioner Pruse to participate.
Is there a second? Okay, there's a motion.
Reverse. Let me switch it.
That's fine.
I just switched it back.
She'll fix it. Here we go. Okay, there we are. Okay, is there any objection to directing Mr. Pruse to participate in case 2011-085? There's no objection.
Okay. And Chair, Mr. Isham, do you have any?
I have no disclosures.
Okay. And Commissioner Phelps, do you have anything to disclose this evening?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let the record show that Mr. Phelps is here. Thank you, Ms. Yoshimura. Okay, we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Got two items, 1A and 1B. Take a positive motion to approve those resolutions. Been moved by Mr. Frederick, second by Ms. Dean. Does anybody wish to pull either 2011-019 or 2011-027? Okay, there's no cases to be pulled. Is there any objection for approving those two resolutions? No objection. Those two resolutions are approved. Okay, we'll now move on to the public hearing portion of the meeting. What I'd like to do first is read the rules on the public hearing, put them on the record. After staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, I will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in our rules of procedure, and those limits are: the petitioner has 10 minutes, representatives of groups such as a community council or PTAs have 5 minutes, and an individual has 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes. These appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after the Planning and Zoning Commission's final decision. And finally, any individual may request written findings from any Commission decision within 7 days. So we'll move on with our public hearings. The first case is 2011-082. Petitioner is a municipality of Anchorage, and it's a zoning conditional use for natural resource extraction. If we'd like to go ahead and have the municipality make its presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for final conditional use. It's for the importation of approximately 70,000 cubic yards of fill. The fill is to be placed on a 12.6-acre portion of a site located in the northwest corner of Tract B, soccer baseball subdivision. There is no extraction associated with this conditional use. There will be no extraction at the petition site. Tract B is the site of the South Anchorage Sports Park. It's located north of West Clatt Road, south of O'Malley Road, and west of C Street. Access to the site is from West Clatt Road. The intent of the fill operation is to surcharge, stabilize, and grade the site to provide a level playing field. This was the former site of soccer fields, which have been closed because of the differential settling of the petition site due to the fact that it's over 20 feet of peat, has resulted in a very uneven, unlevel playing field, which is no longer suitable for active sports. So that is the intent of this fill operation. The source of the fill material is coming from Campbell Lake. Campbell Lake needs to be periodically dredged to lower the level of the lake. A dam, this is a private lake. It was dammed in the late 50s to create the lake, and silt does collect in the lake over years, and periodically it has to be dredged. So therefore, the actual fill material is coming from a dredge operation. This fill operation originally started in 2007. At that time, there was a grade and fill permit issued for 27,000 cubic yards of material to be placed on the northwest portion of Tract B. This was only partially accomplished. Only 15,000 cubic yards of material was placed and graded. And the site plan that was submitted with the application does show the boundaries of the fill and grading and seeding, topsoil and seeding that was done in 2007. So actually only 49,000, an estimated 49,000 cubic yards of material is anticipated to be needed to cover the whole site. That includes the 15,000 cubic yards that was already placed there. However, the petitioner wishes an additional 21,000 cubic yards of material just as a matter of contingency in the event that in finalizing this project, additional fill is determined to be needed to provide a level surface in the northwest corner of this site. The dredging operation will take place in the winter of 2011-2012. The material will be frozen. It will be placed on the site. And grading operations will commence after the material is thawed and has been well drained. And once the grading is completed, there will be 4 inches of topsoil placed on the site, and the site will be reseeded with a seed mix that conforms to municipal standard specifications. The portions of the elements of the comprehensive plan that pertain to this is the Anchorage 2020, and this does conform to policies 44 and 86. The Anchorage Park Natural Resource and Facility Plan that was adopted in 2006, the priority of that plan was to maintain what is already existing facilities, and this certainly does this operation conforms to that. It also conforms to the 1996 Wetlands Management Plan. The Clat Bog, which is composed of Type B wetlands, does abut the west petition site boundary. There are a number of drainage, erosion, and sediment control, drainage analysis, and stormwater pollution prevention plan documents that will need to be submitted, will need to be approved, and prior to the issuance of any permit to place fill on this site. It also is in the Anchorage coastal boundary, and it does conform to the goal, one of the goals, stated goals of the coastal plan to maintain the integrity of the environmental resource of Clat Bog. And one of the goals that is mentioned in that plan is that there would be diverse sports activities adjacent to the Clat Bog, and this is a sports field. A dust control plan will need to be submitted to Department of Health and Human Services for review and approval prior to the issuance of a grade and fill permit. The estimated duration of this project is 20 days, and that is estimated. It could be subject to change, but that yields an average daily truck count of 250 to 350 round trips. But those trucks will only be full for one way of the trip, and that is the trip from Campbell Lake to the site. They will be running empty back to Campbell Lake. 2 haul routes have been identified in the application. Route 1 utilizes 2 local streets, Curlew Circle and Arlene Drive. However, that haul route was not used during the 2007 operation. The second route will have no impact on residential streets because all the streets that would be utilized are collector or grader standard. The proposal, generally, it does meet conditional use standards and the standards for a natural resource, in this case, operation to import fill material with no extraction that's being taken on the site. DEC has reviewed soil testing that was done in 2005, 2007, 2008, and 2010, and found that any contaminants found in the Campbell Lake fill are similar to those that occur in native soils. And the DNR Coastal and Ocean Management determined that this proposed project does not require further review. They had no objection to this project. So the department does recommend approval of the conditional use request. subject to conditions that are found on pages 17 and 19 of the packet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Let's see, questions for staff. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, do you know when they're going to go ahead and excavate from Campbell Lake? Do you have any idea at this point?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Dean, the excavation or the dredging is actually going to take place during the winter months when the lake is frozen, the lake bed is frozen. So that's when the excavation will take place. It will be placed throughout the site to make the eventual grading of the fill material easier. They're not going to stockpile it in a big hill. So that's the winter phase, and then the grading would be the spring-summer phase of this project.
My next question is, I would like to go on the record that 6 years ago, I was told by the Corps of Engineers that Campbell Lake was severe enough contamination that when I wanted to put float plane slips in for a customer, that I was going to be excavating soils on the lake edge there, that I could not leave the property with those soils, that they had to stay there, otherwise they were considered hazardous waste. That is what I was told 6 years ago. It's just interesting now that it's suddenly not hazardous waste.
Okay, Mr. Phelps?
Through the chair, is it the intention that when this operation is done that the site will be prepared for continued recreation use?
Through the chair, Mr. Phelps, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Pruse?
Thank you. So based on your volume of material that's going in and the amount of days that you say it's going to take, I estimate you're going to have a truck go through on the site, be dumping every 2 to 3 minutes, which, being in that business, is about as aggressive as I've ever seen. I think it's practically based where the dump site is. It's going to be physically impossible. On your haul route, just looking at this traffic, the traffic, consider that many trucks per hour, roughly 20 to 25 trucks an hour, hitting the roads with that. I mean, I can see them backing up. I can see the turning back on West Platte Road being a problem.
Through the chair, Mr. Pruse, on page 40 are comments from traffic, and traffic has no objection, stated no objection. They did have advisory comments, and that was basically addressing the need for stormwater pollution prevention plan.
So they didn't look at the volume of the trucks based on the 20-day construction time? Because I don't see that. I mean, that to me, traffic would be the first thing they would do is what impact it would have.
Through the chair, Mr. Pruse, the only information I have from traffic is on page 40.
All right. My comment is there's no way you're going to do it in 20 days. And I don't know if that has any bearing on the ultimate permit, but in reality, it should reflect what reality will happen. And I just want to go on the record saying that.
Mr. Phelps?
I just want to go back to Commissioner Dean's statement about the hazardous material. I'm looking at page 64, and it's from ADEC, and their conclusion is that the material is non-hazardous. I think that's the wording they use. Non-hazardous material. So it's my understanding that from a regulatory point of view, I guess that their entity that has a responsibility here is ADEC, that they view the waste material, or the material that's going to be moved as being non-hazardous. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Phelps, yes, that's correct. And on page 68 are comments from the state of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, Division of Spill Prevention and Response. The first sentence on page 69 states, in accordance with this determination, the department, referring to the state of Alaska, does not consider the Campbell Lake sediment to pose a human health or environmental risk, and its disposal is not subject to any restrictions or conditions. And it's signed by the environmental program specialist.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, we'll go to the public hearing. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, one last question. On the traffic hitting the road out of the construction site where they're being loaded in the winter, is my understanding this is wet material coming out of the lake. They take the ice off and then excavate out the material. Those trucks in the winter, it's got to be fairly cold, I'd imagine, for the trucks to run on the ice. Once they hit the road, what is the municipality's position about keeping the road free of mud and ice during cold weather conditions from the truck traffic?
Through the chair, Mr. Pruz, my understanding is that the material will be frozen, but I would defer further to the petitioner's representative to answer that question.
Okay, so was that ever reviewed by staff of the municipality?
The SWIP will address that issue with the grading permit, prior to the issuance of a grading permit.
The SWIP on a public road?
Pardon?
When they get on the public road?
Well, that's part of the mitigation measures that are looked at with the stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, fine. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing portion. This is on case 2011-082. Is there anybody that wishes to testify? Well, the petitioner is a municipality. Okay, sir, if you'd state your name for the record, please.
My name is Tim Martinson. My address is 12201 Hilltop Drive.
Sir, the mic has gone dead all of a sudden. Just a minute here.
Is it on?
There you go. You pushed the button. If you could start again.
Okay, my name is Tim Martinson. Address is 12201 Hilltop Drive. I've got a question for staff over there as to what happens after reseeding. Who takes care of the property? Do they go out there and reseed and just let it go and dry up, or are they responsible for watering it, bringing it up to grass? Because it's going to dry out if there's an irrigation put out there.
Mr. Chair? Yes, the
Yes,
property
go ahead.
owned by Parks and Recreation, and I would guess that they are responsible for maintaining the viability of their sports fields.
Any further comments, sir?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Pruz had asked, on that 20-day deal. I believe this contract is open until 2013, so they can renew it, if they don't get all the fill out in 20 days. I don't believe it's just a 20-day period there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarification, I was going off the winter construction activity for the excavation off of the lake, and the petitioner indicated it to be a 20-day construction to haul in the initial amount, and she indicated 200 to 250 loads a day. So I just divided that by 10.
Yeah.
And if it's 20 days...
At the community council, we asked the same questions, and we didn't think they could get it done in 20 days either. And actually, this winter, they drained that lake, so they're not having to haul the ice off. It's basically go in there and start digging.
Sir, do you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to testify? Mr. Bote, are you the petitioner's sort of representative on this thing?
Indeed, I am.
Please state your name for the record.
Absolutely. Jacques Boutet, principal with the Boutet Company, here tonight on behalf of the municipality as the petitioner's representative. And I won't ask the Commission to sit through another recitation of the good information that Mrs. O'Brien provided, but I would like to go ahead and address a couple of comments that came forward from the Commission as well as the public hearing, the gentleman that just spoke a minute ago. Again, we benefit from having attempted this, or actually followed through with this project several years ago. So we do have some knowledge, practical knowledge and experience in how the operation works even under fairly difficult and challenging conditions. So, and I do believe that the plan as devised and ultimately was bid last winter reflects the lessons learned in our 2007 effort. That said, I certainly recognize Commissioner Prue's comment that generating 250 trucks a day is going to be challenging for anybody, including someone with as much experience and resources as Commissioner Prue's. However, we, just for purposes of presenting a quote-unquote worst-case scenario for the traffic department and other folks that were interested in this project, we kind of framed this in a fairly extreme case. The reality is, if you look back at the bid documents that we put out last year, and will essentially reissue if we're able to go forward with this permit, we do give prospective contractors more than treble that time, the 20 days, to get the job done. Again, the 20-day number was proffered to simply look at a worst-case scenario where we have a very, very efficient operation and ideal conditions, and looking at potential traffic loads on the streets and highways, as well as some of the other considerations that follow through with a fairly intensive construction operation. That said, it seems more realistic to assume, and we're certainly going to provide adequate time in our bid specifications for, I won't call it a more leisurely approach, but let's just say that probably looking at the order of more like 100 to 150 truckloads per day coming out of the lake. Speaking to the hazardous material situation, I was a bit surprised with Commissioner Dean's comment. During our initial permitting work going on 6 years ago now, which would have been not too right in the same time period that you approached the Corps, we sat down with the Corps, and believe me, they raised a number of issues, and they made that permitting process about as challenging as a permitting process can be. But curiously enough, and I share your interest in this, a hazardous materials question never came up in our discussions. We sort of inflicted a bit of that injury ourselves while, again, during our third round of sampling out at the lake, we did get a hit last year, a single hit for a substance that exceeded EPA thresholds. And that certainly was something of great concern. We immediately reacted by going back to DEC, working with them to outline a fairly aggressive retesting program of the area where we got the hit. And we went back in there and sampled that, if you'll excuse a frivolous term, like a pincushion. We were unable to reproduce that result. Again, in concert with DEC, we evaluated the results, and we all agreed that that hit that we received, that we acquired last fall, was anomalous, and hence, as Mrs. O'Brien presented a few minutes ago, we have a letter of a certification from DEC that they're comfortable with these soils as reflecting the types of backgrounds that we would expect from native materials. With respect to the question about maintenance, again, our contractor would be required to come in, again, under an approved SWIP program that would be rigorously inspected. 2, we will specify a depth of topsoil and a seed schedule consistent with what we see in the municipality, and they'll be required to maintain that through the normal warranty period. Subsequent to that, then the maintenance issue then transfers back to the city. Again, our interest is in. Well, we'll be required to complete the construction in the winter months. The dam will have to be closed back up and the lake refilled by the end of April. So we'll be done with, even in the worst case scenario, we'll be done with our hauling by early spring. Again, the material is very high in moisture content, most of which is ice, but there is some free water in there. So we'll have to allow that to drain. That we should probably take to May into June, and then because the material is very, very much sand, it should drain very, very quickly, and then we'll be able to get the contractor back out there probably right after Memorial Day to go ahead and do the final grading, topsoil, and seeding. So presumably by late summer, the grass will be grown in, and some of the other activities can resume out there. I think I've hit most of the questions.
Okay, Mr. Prus.
Thank you. First, I'm glad to hear that it's not a 20-day project. I was worried that it would be pushed to either 2 shifts a day or something to meet that 20-day timeline, which would really put a burden on the neighborhood. One of the questions I have for you is, do you see any traffic control at the dump site during operations, as far as egress and access to those south ball fields on West Platte?
The standard operating procedure now for South Anchorage Sports Park is that it is not maintained after winter onset. In fact, our contractor will be required to plow the access road out and establish a connection between the South Anchorage Sports Park and, in this case, Clatt Road. So there would be no activities in conflict with the construction operations.
No, I'm talking about access on and off of Clatt Road with the trucks.
Oh.
Like flaggers.
Understood. Again, last time, the contractor will be required, as they are in all municipal projects, to operate under an approved traffic control plan. Because there's a signal there, at this point, we don't really need flags because everything's operating under a signal-controlled operation. So we have a right turn in, so that should be fairly straightforward. And then trucks won't be able to leave until they get a green ball. And it's a permissive left turn movement there. But again, the signal should provide, or did provide in the last operation, as much traffic control as we needed. Certainly, as we do on all our projects, if we see a need for additional traffic control, either as directed by the municipality or as we observe on site, we do direct the contractor to do any means necessary to ensure public safety, convenience.
Any further questions for Mr. Botay? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I want to apologize to Mr. Martinson. We should have had Mr. Botay go first. I did not realize that you were the petitioner's representative in this case, because very often the municipality just does their own thing and doesn't have an engineer sitting in for them. So anyway, I apologize. Okay, are there any further questions from was there anybody else who wishes to testify? Okay, well, Mr. Botay, you've got about 4 minutes to rebut anything you want to rebut. You may have taken care of it, but do you need to use your rebuttal time or not? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Good Chair, no thank you.
Okay. Any questions from members of the commission? Okay, fine. The public hearing is closed and the matter rests with the commission. We need a positive motion for approval. Been moved by Mr. Frederick, seconded by Mr. Pruse. Mr. Frederick, would you please state your motion?
In the matter of case number 2011-082, Municipality of Anchorage, the request for a final conditional use to allow a natural resource operation on Track B soccer baseball subdivision. I move to approve.
Subject to?
Subject to the conditions listed in the packet, department recommendations on pages 17, 18, and 19.
Okay, and that's been seconded by Mr. Pruse. Mr. Frederick, would you speak to your motion, please?
This seems to be a fairly straightforward project. It does, as the staff pointed out in the packet, furthers the goals of the comprehensive development plan, specifically Anchorage 2020 policies 44 and 86. It meets the requirements of the Anchorage Wetlands Management Plan, the Anchorage Coastal Management Plan, and meets the conditions, conforms to the standards for conditional use for natural resource extraction.
Thank you. Any additional comments from members of the commission? Are there any objections? Then that's approved. Okay, now we'll move on to case number 2011-085. The applicant is David Hartman, and this is a conditional use permit for natural resources extraction. So if we could hear from staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 15 of the packet shows the site plan. Pardon me. There were two public comments on this case. There were no comments from the Community Council. One of the public comments asked the question of what type of material will be extracted from the site. The other person commented in support of approving this conditional use permit for natural resource extraction. The question, the answer to the question about what will be extracted will be all the material there will be taken to the Lucy Pit and the Sand Lake fill site to try and fill those fill areas, and the remaining peat will be processed for topsoil for commercial selling of the topsoil. This request for natural resource extraction on King's subdivision the granting of this conditional use permit will resolve the code enforcement issue pending on the property. The petitioner stated that approximately 5,000 cubic yards of fill has already been removed from the site. He wasn't aware that he needed a conditional use permit for natural resource extraction. This is a very small project. He's taking 77,000 cubic yards of fill out, and that's about that's 27,000 cubic yards over the limit that's allowed under a building safety fill and grade permit. Let's see. Page 28 of the packet shows the code enforcement letter. Code enforcement stated that they agree with the petitioner that about 5,000 cubic yards has already been removed. A stop work order was put on the petitioner. There's I-2 property just south of this I-1 zone property, and there's some confusion about what was allowed on the I-1 and what wasn't allowed. I think what first called out code enforcement, my theory, it may have been just that he was doing work, and there may have been stockpiles of dirt, which you're not allowed to have in the I-1, but is allowed in the I-2. And there's a lot of I-2 property in that part of town, and you can see piles of dirt on those I-2 zone properties. The site's about approximately 12 acres. The petitioner is asking for 5 years to allow him to do the peat processing. The general standards of conditional use approval appear to be met. Also, the specific standards for conditional use also appear to be met for natural resource extraction. There are Class C wetlands on the site, and page 19 of the packet shows the municipal MOA wetlands atlas. I'll show you where those wetlands are. The reason why the property is why the owner of the property is engaged in moving dirt in the first place is that there is a current subdivision agreement for preparing this property for individual lots. That is, the Planning Board approved a preliminary plat for case S11174-2, King Subdivision Edition Number 2, which contained the petition site. The final plat was recorded in Plat 2005-53. To file the plat, the petitioner entered into a subdivision agreement with the municipality for required road improvements, drainage improvements, and other installations prescribed by the improvement area where the subdivision is located. To date, no improvements have prescribed in the subdivision agreement have been made. I'd like to turn to the department's recommendation for approval. The department does recommend approval, but there are, I'd like to go through some of the conditions so that it makes sense. There are some conditions that I'd like to change, and there are some conditions that you may not see on your typical natural resource extraction conditional use. On page 9 of the packet, condition number 4, there shall be a minimum separation distance of 4 feet between the depth of the resource extraction and the seasonal high water table within the site. This has to do with the best management practices for drinking water protection, and that's on those recommendations are on pages 12 and 13 of your packet. You can see that's a DEC sort of standard guidance. Let's see. Condition number 15 is sort of associated with that. Extraction operations shall follow the ADEC best management requirements and practices for gravel pit operations. Condition number 6, hot batching, blasting, and snow dumping are prohibited. I'd like to add one sentence to that condition of approval. The condition, or the sentence would read, no importing of material is allowed except for approved building permits. And this is just to eliminate any confusion that no material can be brought on site unless it's approved by private development for the preparation of this site for a commercial subdivision. There may be the need to bring something on site, but there should be enough topsoil on site to revegetate the area. Anyway, so that the condition that that we're recommending is no importing of material is allowed except for approved building permits, except under an approved building permit.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Is that 6?
Yeah, condition number 6.
So you're taking out the hot batching, blasting, and snow dumping are prohibited.
Yeah, so
That's going away.
No.
Okay.
There's just a declarative statement that those activities are not allowed on the site. In addition, no material can be brought from elsewhere around town to the site unless it's under a building permit. So it's pretty common that the department recommends a condition stating that you can't rock crush, screen, blast, dynamite. I mean, there's different sort of, no snow dumping is allowed here, just to make it clear to the petitioner and to code enforcement what's allowed on site. And so what we've recommended would stay. We just want to add a condition that no importing of material is allowed except under an approved building permit. Condition 7. This one stay the same, but I just wanted to explain it. There's a existing Corps of Engineers permit for the site, and there have been problems with it in the past, and so I just wanted to make sure that this was on the record, that it's under a Corps of Engineers permit. It says adhere to the conditions of the Corps of Engineers permit. Peat extraction activities shall not infringe on nor dewater the proposed preservation wetlands within Lot 20. There is, I'll skip down to 8A, show the location of the driveway, gate, and peat processing on the site plan. Those, the location of the gate and those other items are just not shown on the site plan. We'd like them to be there. Page 4, obtain approval for a time extension for subdivision agreement 04-007 or enter into a new agreement with private development for required public improvements approved by plating case S11174-2, King Subdivision Number 2. So that's just restating something that they should already be working on. C, it says provide water table information to private development. No water table information was provided with this application. We're asking for it now. The last condition of approval that we would like to add is we'd like to add a letter K. So after the J on page 10, we'd like to add a letter K, and it would read obtain approval from the Corps of Engineers. And this has to do with the late comments that were submitted by the Corps of Engineers that were laid on the table for the Commission this evening. I just want to point that out to the Commission. They were laid on the table this evening. You can flip through them on page, well, I guess it's the third page in. There's sort of a strongly worded statement from the Corps of Engineers about them not being aware of this natural resource extraction project, and they may need to amend their Corps of Engineers permit, or they need to review that. And so just for safety's sake, we wanted to add a condition based on this new information that says obtain approval from the Corps of Engineers. So before they could do any work, they'd have to go to the Corps of Engineers, straighten things out, and get Corps of Engineers to sign off that everything has been straightened out. The hours of operation are standard, 7 a.m. till 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday, with no operations on Sunday or holidays. The truck route, we have no problem with that. And this is an industrial area. All the other conditions of approval are standard. Apologize for taking up so much time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Pruse.
Thank you. On recommendation number 6, adding the no importation of materials unless approved by private development, what do you envision if the petitioner is going to extract material and bring it, sell the peat off or whatever he's planning on doing, and take some to Sand Lake? There's going to be a hole, I assume, unless it's a big mountain, which will then turn into a pond. So he could basically let it sit there until he has a approved plan with a whole approved plan. Or I'm just a little confused about that this thing you want to add. I'm trying to get to how does he fill the hole back up so that there isn't a big hole and it makes a bigger problem if he extracts the unusable material that he doesn't want.
Through the chair, Mr. Pruse, thank you for the question. I think the question is that this is an extraction operation, and he's preparing the site for development as a commercial subdivision. And why would we want to put that condition there? Because he may need to import material, in order to fill up the hole, in order to prepare it for that subdivision. Is that the question?
Well, I would assume you want him to fill the hole up. Mm-hmm. With something, mm-hmm. but he's got to have some type of an approval by private development with an approved, obviously, set of building plans, mm-hmm. which may or not be the case as he has opportunities to get rid of the unusable material that he doesn't need.
Through the chair, Mr. Pruse. So it's a valid question. This is an extraction operation, but it is not a fill operation. the intent is to clear away, in order to level the property and to make the required public improvements under the subdivision agreement, to comply with the subdivision agreement, he needs to take dirt off the site, right? The idea is not to create a hole in the ground at all, but simply to prepare the site for development. That is to say, to scrape off the top layer. There is no material that should be brought on site. There was no discussion of that in the application. There's been no mention of that from the applicant. So there should be no material brought on site. The petitioner has a history of not following rules, and so this is really an unnecessary condition that I'm requesting be added because I don't think the petitioner has any intention to bring any material on site. But he will be, for the next 5 years, if this is granted, be commercially selling this processed peat. And we don't want material from off-site being brought here to be processed and then sold. It should only be the material on-site. So given the track record of this petitioner, it just made sense to, sort of close any confusion or loopholes about what can be done on site and add this verbiage.
Okay, so basically you're saying that the material that he's taking off is going to be above finished elevation?
That's right.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Prus, we can ask that of the petitioner, too, when he gets up to testify.
I just wanted to,
Yeah.
when he put
Okay.
that in, I wanted to know what the reasoning was.
Right. Okay. Do you have any further questions for him? Okay. Ms. Yoshimura?
Yes. In regards to the comments on item number 5, where it says that the petitioner entered into a subdivision agreement on 2004 and posted the requisite performance guarantee, which, as I understand it, at the present time, is a deed of trust on lots 13, 15, 17, and 19. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Ms. Pease, I do believe that that's correct.
I'm Ms. Yoshimura.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Again.
Oh, gosh.
You did that last time.
That's right.
So,
Sorry.
So do we know if these lots are free and clear, or if they've been encumbered in some way?
I don't know the answer to those questions. I'd ask that you direct it to the petitioner.
Okay.
In speaking with Don Kiefer in private development, the way he explained it to me was he said that, the applicant applied to subdivide property. He entered into a subdivision agreement to make public improvements. They recorded the final plat. Property's been subdivided. But the required public improvements have not been made under the subdivision agreement.
Correct.
And I guess it used to be that you could use the property as the sort of guarantee, the escrow or the collateral.
Right.
And you can't do that anymore. The petitioner may have been justified in not doing the work under the subdivision agreement thus far because the property is encumbered by so much sort of wetlands and Corps of Engineer permits and that sort of thing. So it may have taken longer to sort of get started on all of this than what was in the original subdivision agreement. Now, we've added a condition of approval here that says that he needs to either comply with the old agreement or sign a new one before he can do this project, before he can obtain this conditional use.
So my question is sort of a procedural one, because before we approve a conditional use permit for a natural resource extraction, shouldn't this subdivision agreement be brought current in some way?
That's absolutely correct. And that's what we're doing here. Condition 8B says obtain approval of a time extension for a subdivision agreement or enter into a new agreement with private development for the required improvements under the case. So, yes, per our code, a new entitlement should not be granted until, other issues have been, resolved and fixed. And so the approval of this conditional use permit tonight by the Commission would get us there. And the reason why is what happens after tonight is, staff writes if the project's approved, if the conditional use is approved by the commission this evening, all of these conditions of approval will apply, and staff will write the resolution. It'll be approved next month. The petitioner will have to resolve every one of these conditions before they can do anything on site. They won't be permitted to extract a shovel of dirt until that condition of approval is met. That's why it's under the section that says, prior to the issuance of any land use or excavation permit, the following shall be accomplished.
I understand all that, and I appreciate all that. I'm just wondering why the commission hears this case prior to all of that being accomplished. It seems to me it would be a better use of the commission's time if some of these issues were resolved prior to the case coming forward for natural resource extraction. I frankly am hesitant to approve anything in the condition that this project is in until some of these other issues have been resolved. And so, quite frankly, I think the appearance tonight is a little premature.
Thank you, Ms. Pease. I'm sorry, Ms. Yoshimura. I will. I've taken note of what you said, and I will take that comment to staff to consider the next time an application is submitted. Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, fine. Mr. Wilson.
This is a natural resource extraction permit for scraping off the layer to the eventual grade and going ahead and extracting what is above that. But you said that it was, something like this, that we don't want to have him importing other peat and selling that on the property. Is there, what's the reasoning for not having, not allowing a business operation during that? Is that contrary to the code?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Wilson. The I-1 district does not allow open storage of, it actually prohibits open storage of peat. Actually, I'm going to flip to the part of code so I can read it.
And is that proposed to be changed?
No, I don't believe that the new code would change this.
Sounds like,
so
maybe there's a reason for it, but I can't imagine what it is.
So Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 2140-200, the I-1 District E, prohibited uses and structures. It lists the open storage of cinders, coal, feed, grain, gravel, manure, muck, peat, sand, or topsoil as being prohibited uses. So because these uses are prohibited, the only way that you're allowed to do what he's proposing to do, which is to process his peat in sort of an open fashion, is under this conditional use, and it's going to be open for the next 5 years. To try and meet the intent of this prohibition of open storage of peat and topsoil, it's only being allowed for the dirt that exists on site, and no dirt should be brought off-site, on-site for this.
Maybe I need to be schooled in why we can't have piles of peat on an I-1, but that's not before us tonight.
Well, through the chair, Mr. Wilson, the intent of the I-1 district it's intended primarily for urban and suburban light manufacturing, processing, storage, wholesale, and distribution operations, but is also allows limited commercial uses. That's the I-1 district. The I-2 district is intended primarily for heavy manufacturing, storage, major shipping terminals. The idea is that the I-2 allows those activities, not the I-1. But I mean, it's an interesting question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take about a 5-minute break here, and then we'll hear from the petitioner. Calling the August 1st, 2011 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission back to order. We'll go ahead and hear from the petitioner now in case number 2011-085, zoning conditional use for natural resource extraction. Please state your name for the record, sir.
My name is David Hartman.
Okay, sir, and you've got 10 minutes. Do you wish to reserve any time for rebuttal?
Yes, I would like to reserve probably half of it. At least I don't have an awful lot to say right now.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Are we ready? Mr. Chair and staff, in regards to the lot question, they are free and clear. When the staff members asked about the lots, they are all free and clear, everything in the petition. I have another question was brought up, or actually a statement. I think Mr. McLaughlin wanted to add on J, he wanted to add obtain approval from COE. I have a letter from the Corps of Engineers stating here that they have no control over excavation of wetlands. If you'd like to, I can present this to you if you'd like to look at that and pass it around.
Okay, fine. We'll take this and accept it into the record. Just a second while we get this thing ready.
Okay. So I kind of take exception to that statement. Mr. McLaughlin wanted to add, obtain COE approval.
Okay, just a second, sir. We'll stop your time here. This is the letter dated July 27th that was in our handout, so we already have a copy of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what page that's on in the handout. Maybe Mr. McLaughlin knows? The Corps of Engineers letter, do you know what page that's on in our handout?
It's the very first thing that's laid on the table. It's dated July 27th. Okay, sir, you can go ahead and talk to that paragraph.
Okay, so I wanted to just make sure everybody's clear. My main purpose for my petition is to be able to process the peat I have on my property on site. My property, as stated, is I-1 on the north side of King Street, which does not allow that. The south side, 92nd Street, I say, north side of 92nd Street is I-1, south side of 92nd Street is I-2. That processing of peat is not allowed in I-1. It is allowed in I-2. Makes it much more cost-effective for me to process my own peat on my property and then take it directly from my property to the finished product site, somebody's backyard, whoever wants to process topsoil, instead of taking it in bulk form across the street, processing it, and then, taking on that down the road. It was always my understanding when I got this property originally from the municipality, during the people I worked for, that processing of my own peat on my property was allowed. And that's maybe where I was miscaboobered. I had nothing in writing from the municipality, just all verbal comments that this is what was allowed. They wanted you to do that because they didn't want you to track the whole streets up with bringing peat from point A to point B until it gets processed. And so I was under the impression in my subdivision agreement I was allowed to do that. Apparently I was wrong. And with that being said, I just want to take exception to Mr. McLaughlin's statement that the petitioner's track record indicates that we need to throw all kinds of statements in and make sure he does everything legal. I'm sure we've all done a few not quite so right things in our past, not even knowing that they were illegal. We make mistakes, and I, do an awful lot of things myself as a contractor and as a human being. And I feel the more things you do, the more mistakes you probably make throughout your life. And I've made a few of them. So anyways, with that, back to my main statement was the main reason I'm doing this conditional use is to process the topsoil on my property. Any questions?
Okay, Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, my question is, when did you purchase this property? What year?
In 2002, I think.
And then you were given a violation in May.
Yes. At that time, what happened was, in about 1999, 2000, I bought 7 acres of property on the east side of King Street. 7 acres. Had to go to the Corps of Engineers to obtain a permit. I did so for the first acre. The remaining 6 acres, I went back to the Corps of Engineers. They stated, well, we no longer control Class C wetlands. You don't have to deal with us. You go to the municipality. You get a permit from them under their GPs, which is standard, called general permits. You get a permit, you go to work, and you do whatever you want to do. I did that with the remaining 6 acres. Bought 23 acres on the west side of King Street, which I now own, which is what we're petitioning for. I went to the municipality, obtained a permit from them in August of 2003, the same permit I got from them 2 years previous, to fill and grade approximately 5 acres of the same piece of property. Under the GPs, again, this is supposedly Corps of Engineers had no control over Class C wetlands. It states, I think, even in one of the handouts, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, it says Class C wetlands developable under the GPs through the municipality of Anchorage. 6 or 8 months later, I got a letter from the Corps of Engineers stating that I was in violation of the Wetlands Act. And I called them up. I said, well, how can this be? I have a permit from the municipality, did the exact same thing I did 2 years ago on the east side of King Street. I'm doing it now. And they said, oh, no, we still have control, jurisdictional control over that property. So I've been in a battle with them for the last 8 years on this exact front. And so what I'm doing now is trying to set the stage to kind of do some things that, you know, maybe the Corps of Engineers don't like. Well, I don't like what they've done to me for the last 8 years. I bought the property for $1.7 million in 2002. They now want $1.1 million for me to be able to develop my own property that I've already paid for. So I just think there's some real injustices being done to myself there.
Any further questions from the members of the commission? Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Hartman,
Yeah.
how do you plan to process the peat?
We have a trommel. It's a processing machine. You dump it in there, and what it does is it shakes out all the bad stuff and puts the bad stuff over here, and, you know, puts the good topsoil on the other side. The good topsoil is what you use to sell, and then the bad stuff will then be transported out to Sand Lake fill site.
And you'll keep out of the groundwater?
Correct, yeah. There is no groundwater there. This is another problem I have with the Corps of Engineers, but that's another statement, too.
And you'll create a pile in the process?
Try not to. That was my goal, is we want to process this and get rid of it. So we don't plan on having great, big, enormous piles. The site just won't permit that, so... No, we will not have large piles. There'll be small piles periodically that will be dispersed as they're made.
Small as in?
100 cubic yards perhaps, 200 cubic yards maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pruse?
Thank you. Mr. Hartman, your intent is to process the peat down to a finished elevation?
My intent is to remove all the peat in over a 5-year period, process it, and remove it. And ultimately, my goal originally was to fill in the property.
Okay.
I'm leaving that last statement open right now because I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing here. Based on what the comments that Mr. McLaughlin said, it sounds like what I interpreted him to mean was that I could not bring any unprocessed peat onto my property to process. But it kind of sounded to me like what he's thinking now is that I cannot bring in any backfill material. I have a permit from the Corps of Engineers that allows me to do that if I give them $1.1 million. I'm not sure I want to do that. And if Mr. McLaughlin and staff is saying that I can't fill in my property, then as the letter states from the Corps, they have no regulations that require me to do anything for extraction of the peat. So, that being said, that may be an option I have, is to extract the peat and be done with whatever.
Okay.
Ms. Yoshimura?
So, Mr. Hartman, if I understand this last comment correctly, does that mean that if we approve this conditional use and you extracted the peat, we would be left with a hole of a depth of approximately what?
Well, there's approximately 4 feet of peat on the site. And so, to answer your question, I'm not sure if what Mr. McLaughlin is saying that I can even fill the property in. I'm not even sure. That maybe he could allude to that. That was never my intent, was to leave a hole in the ground. And even if the peat was to be removed, there will not be a hole in the ground because the topography is such that the land flows from southeast to northwest. And as the natural ground flows, millions of years ago, before we had roads out there or anything, the water used to travel overland down that direction. And if I were to take out 4 feet of peat, it would still continue that direction, and there would not be a hole in the ground. It's just a natural flow. C Street is pretty much a dam going all the way across my property. They put in C Street, 3 or 4 years ago. They had to put in a special fin drain all the way along the west side of my property to absorb the water that was coming from my property as well as adjacent properties along there. And C Street right now is approximately 4 feet higher than my property. So if I were to take 4 feet of peat off of my property, I would be level with C Street, and there would not be a hole. But there again, that was never my real intent, was to, take off all the peat and, not be able to use the property, not be able to fill it in. My original intent was to, go through the Corps of Engineers, do what I was supposed to do. But with $1 million hanging over my head right now, I'm not sure exactly what I'm able to do, and maybe Mr. McLaughlin can tell me what he's thinking. I was under the impression that I couldn't bring peat on, but I could fill in the property.
Do we have a grading plan? Have I missed that?
Yeah, it should be on, there's I forget what page, Mr. McLaughlin, maybe you know? It's page 14 and 15. 14 and 15.
I'm sorry, what page number?
Number 14 and 15. Actually, number 15 shows the existing and proposed contours, and basically, they are the same. The existing and proposed would be the same. The peat would come out, and the fill material would go in, and the elevations would not change. So if you look right there to the left of all the notes, it shows an existing contours and then a proposed contours. So one of them's a dark, long hash line, and the other one's kind of a short line. And basically, they're one and the same,
So I do have one other question, which is about your subdivision agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So as I understand subdivision agreements now, if you were to your current subdivision agreement has expired, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So, and the municipal policy is that for subdivision agreements, they no longer accept deeds of trust on property, even though it's owned free and clear. Are you aware of that?
I've heard some comments to that effect. I know AWW has changed their policy. So if the MOA has the same policy, then
The MOA has the same policy. So,
so we would have to put up a bond or something to that
Have to
effect,
put up a
which
bond.
we can do as a general contractors. We do that all the time,
you would do that. You
Yep.
would be able to do that.
Yep, I'm getting one right now for AWW. In fact, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, you were in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The language that I proposed was no importing of material is allowed except under an approved building permit.
Right.
So if fill were to be brought on site to keep this information is that Mr. Hartman has described is different from what I was describing here from 10 minutes ago, and I apologize for that. The idea is that the proposed language would allow for fill to be brought on site to recontour the site as shown on the on page 15, the proposed and the existing and proposed final elevations. The language is saying that just as Mr. Hartman had stated that it's not. No importing of peat for processing and sale would be allowed, but fill would be allowed to be brought on site. That would have to be done under a permit because the compaction to allow for buildings, it's very tightly regulated. It has to be compacted properly so that structure can be placed on it.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for the petitioner? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, for staff, So you don't envision any import material that may not be for structural fill being allowed without a set of plans for a building? So as the peat's being extracted, the petitioner could not bring in the same amount of material to keep the existing contours without a set of plans for a building? Is that, I mean, I can see once you have a building that you do your engineering and your soil analysis to have your structural fill, but if there's no building plan and he does a peat operation, what you're requesting us to add would restrict that, would it not, or am I misinterpreting your?
Mr. Prus, I'm not understanding your question, and you have more expertise probably in this than I do. The proposed language would say that, I mean, it's saying that you're not allowed to import any material to the site under this 5-year approval of the conditional use permit for extraction activities. During that time, during the 5 years that this would be in effect, you couldn't bring material on site unless you had a permit to do that. And the permit, we're talking about a building permit for bringing fill to compact for building. I mean, it'd be anything that I think there's flexibility for private development to approve the types of material brought on site.
So he could have a building grading permit without a building plan.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That answers my question. Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Yoshimura?
I'm assuming that you're familiar with the stormwater pollution and prevention plan that you're going to have to have?
Yes, we have one. We have one in place. It just needs to be tuned up a little bit. It's kind of outdated too, but we have one.
And what are your plans for stabilization in regards to and revegetation?
Obviously, the areas that will not be used for building sites, i.e. a building or a parking lot, would be revegetated with trees and, topsoil. We have drainage ditches that are already built into my subdivision agreement, if you will. It's also outdated, but, we're very familiar with the municipal standards regarding, stormwater prevention, and that it all has to be handled through the proper channels and avenues in order to make sure that, no major amounts of water run off my property. And this is why that one area that you see that says preserved wetlands, approximately 2 acres, everything is set up to drain into that area at this time.
So there have been some recent changes to stormwater prevention plans, and are you aware of the fact that any time that a property is disturbed, the soils are disturbed, and it's not for the purposes of construction, that it's going to have to be stabilized, either with, wood chips or topsoil and hydroseeding?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So do you have a plan for that, or you will have a plan for all of that?
I was reading my notes here. Yeah, I will have a plan for that for sure. I think in the notes on the,
well, on the notes it says revegetation will be handled with the use of on-site processed topsoil and seeding along with landscaping to meet code requirements at time of development. And I guess it's at time of development that I question in terms of, is that time of development when you put in the roads, water, and sewer? Is that when you do your natural resource extraction, or is that when you build a building?
It's going to pretty much have to be an ongoing process, obviously, to meet the municipal standards and codes, So, I mean, we're not going to go in there and plant, where I have to put in water sewer lines. We're not going to plant grass and trees, where I have to dig up the road for water, sewer, storm drain, gas, electric, things like that. But other areas that are off of those areas that need constant and ongoing, work, they will have to be stabilized to meet the standards that that we're forced to.
I'm more interested now in just this natural resource extraction that are you planning on at the end of every season then stabilizing those areas in some way?
Yes, and it's there again. That's why I wanted to spend 5 years doing it, just to make it an easy process, and so we don't have to do the whole thing at once type thing, So as I get started on this, if I've got 5 acres and I do 1 acre a year, if I build a building on 1 acre, we develop 1 acre, then that whole 1 acre would be taken care of, both for building purposes as well as stormwater prevention purposes and reseeding, etc.
thank you. Oh, I have one more question. Are you currently being fined because I read somewhere here that there was a fine in place, so you're not facing any sort of daily fine?
Am I currently being fined, did you say?
Yeah.
No, other than being held ransom for $1 million, I'm not being fined. No, I have 2 permits with the Corps of Engineers, and I just have not acted on either one of them. One of them has expired already, but I'm sure that they said that the old one is still okay because I've got a new one that kind of ties the old one to the new one. So no, nobody's been finding me. I am going to go to jail, though. It says in that last letter I'm going to be charged $50,000 a day, and I'm going to go to jail for 3 years. So that's one place I haven't been yet that would really be fun to go, I think. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Okay, Mr. Hart. Any other further questions for Mr. Hartman? Okay, sir, I have one question for you. In regards to the conditions of approval on page 9, 10, and 11 of the packet, are there any of those conditions of approval that you don't think are appropriate or that you object to?
Other than the one I mentioned on number 6, where I think Mr. McLaughlin had entered into the idea that I need a building permit to fill it in, I think that should be clarified to state fill and grading permit or other municipal approved permit. I think, I think that needs to be worded a little bit differently than the way we had worded to make me, being a violator that I am, understand that I cannot bring peat onto the site to process, and yet that I am able to bring fill material onto the site, to fill in where I've taken out the peat. So I think that maybe a little work on that one. And then that J or K, they want to add K, says obtain approval from Corps of Engineers. I strongly resist that statement. They have no control over what I'm asking of the municipality right now. They've stated that in their letter, so I already have a permit from them to go to work for $1 million. But
So what you're telling us then is if we get 6 sort of reworded, so you can bring in fill material as authorized,
right,
and then K, you don't particularly want it in there at all.
Strike it in its entirety, unless, I don't know what he's trying to prove there. I mean, they have no control whatsoever of wetlands, peat extraction in wetlands. They state it right in their letter, and I know that for a fact they don't have any. So that's not a correct statement. If he's got something else that he wants to put in there that states that the Corps of Engineers has to approve, they just can't. That's the bottom line. I mean, they only have jurisdiction over fill. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dean. There's another question here. Wait, you're not off the hook yet, Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, Mr. Hartman, can you tell us why you didn't finish your subdivision completely to finish out the subdivision agreement?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Any particular reason why you never finished your subdivision?
$1 million.
Okay, so it's the Corps of Engineers back that has held you back all the time in finishing out the road. And
it started out, I originally owed them $100,000 5 years ago. And, I didn't have, it was maybe 150 5 years ago. I didn't have 150. I gave him 50. And, and things just haven't gone real great for me a few years. And so it's just kind of always been on hold. And ever since then, the price has just gone up and up and up and up. So now it's like $1.1 million is what they're trying to charge me. They could charge me $200,000. They have what's called a relative ecological value. It's a REV value. They've stated my property is a REV 2. Which is Rev 1 are lakes. Rev 2 is the next best thing to a lake, and Rev 3 is what everything else in that entire area has been classified. Everybody drives up and down King Street, there's a mountain of dirt on the east, directly across the street from my property. That was classified as a Rev 3. He paid $60,000 to develop his 7 acres. They're asking me to pay $1 million to develop my 8 acres. So the difference is on a Rev 2 debit credit analogy, the Rev 2 they classify as $165,000 or $168,000 per debit or credit, and that's for Rev 2. And for Rev 3, it's 40. I'm drawing a blank. 40 or 50,000. It's not going to be. It must be 18,000. It's 18,000. 18,000. So what they're saying is that my piece of property is the highest valued wetland pretty much in the world, although it's surrounded by 4 major arterials, Diamond, C Street, and King Street. And so it's just been a real battle with me for the last 8 years with them, and I'm trying to work through it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a minute. Mr. McLaughlin.
Well, I apologize. I don't mean to cut anyone off. Through the chair, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, staff doesn't have any objection to the two changes that the petitioner recommended. Mr. Hartman, I think I heard him say that he'd like to have the wording that I proposed, no importing of material is allowed except under an approved building permit. He'd like to have that changed to say no importing of peat. And the department has no objection to that. Also, he wanted to have the condition suggested tonight, obtain approval from the Corps of Engineers. And the removal of that condition, staff doesn't have a problem with that either. There's another condition that we have here that says adhere to the Corps of Engineers permits, and we feel that that's satisfactory. Of course, it's up to the commission, but the two suggestions that Mr. Hartman has, staff's fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hartman? Okay, sir, you've got 3 minutes and 48 seconds left for rebuttal after we finish the rest of the public testimony. Is there anybody else that wishes to testify? Is there anybody else that wishes to testify? Okay, Mr. Hartman, do you want to talk for another 3 minutes and 48 seconds, or are we done?
Just wondering if I could buy a vowel or perhaps sell those 3 minutes to someone else. No, I'm good. I appreciate you guys hearing everything from me, and I hope things are fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. The matter rests with the commission. Need a positive motion for approval? Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Dean and seconded by Mr. Pruz. Ms. Dean, would you please state your motion?
In the matter of case 2011-085, I move to approve the conditional use permit for natural resource extraction at the King Subdivision Number 1, Tract B, King Subdivision Number 1, Block 2, Lot 5 and 6, King Subdivision Number 2, Block 1, Lots 13 through 20. Along with the department recommendations on pages 9, 10, and 11, with the two changes that Francis McLaughlin has suggested. The first change was to item number 6, no importing of peat be allowed unless a building permit is approved or a fill and grading permit is approved. And the second one had to do with the Corps of Engineer permit, and I missed what Francis said, if he could repeat that for me.
Through the chair, Ms. Dean, the suggested language was obtain approval from the Corps of Engineers. That's the condition that the petitioner took issue with.
And you recommended that be deleted? Yeah.
Staff's fine with, yeah,
that would have been...
Of deleting that suggested...
Yeah, you put that in as 8K, I believe, so it just doesn't exist.
Okay, so we're going to delete 8K then, correct?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's been seconded by Mr. Pruz. So, Ms. Dean, would you speak to your motion, please?
The petitioner has had to go through quite a lot of paperwork and issues with the Corps of Engineers to try and deal with the peat on this property. He has gone through an amazing amount of issues with them. It's never easy dealing with the Corps of Engineers. They're a moving target. And I'd like to see him be able to continue to use his property and utilize it as it was bought for.
Okay, any further comments from members of the commission? Mr. Frederick.
I think we should note that the petition meets the general standards for conditional use approval as outlined in the packet, and also meets the conditions for natural resource extraction as outlined in the packet.
And we treat those as findings. Okay, any further comments from members of the commission? Okay, is there any objection? No objection, that is approved. Okay, that's it for tonight, but before we dismiss ourselves, the next meeting is on the 8th, and it starts at 6:30 in Eagle River at the middle school there off of Eagle River Road. There was some information we were going to have a 5:30 work session, but there is no work session. We're just going straight there, meeting at 6:30. So we'll be talking about this is on the 8th, right? We'll be talking about, I'm sorry, no work session.
Where is it again?
It's at Gruning Middle School in Eagle River. It's off of Eagle River Road just before you get to Walmart, basically. Okay. Anybody have any words of wisdom for?
And on the 8th, you've got 2 public hearings, right?
Oh, basically, yes, 2 public hearings.
Rezone and
Yeah.
Title 21?
Right. And both of those pertain to the Eagle River area, obviously.
I do have a conflict that night. I'm going to try to make it, but I may not be able to be there.
Okay. Any other words of wisdom for the group?
I too am going to try. I'll be coming in from Kodiak on that day, in weather permitting and planes flying. And
Yeah.
I should be maybe there.
Maybe there, right.
My
I'm going
schedule says I'll be there, but
well, if you don't make it, I won't get out to Kodiak the next day, probably. So.
yeah, you would know.
Yeah. Okay. Any other input? Oh, yes, Ms. Dean.
I just had one thought about Title 21 coming up, and it looks like it potentially in October we're going to hear about it. I've thought about possibly putting it off until November instead, so that if we do have any changes to the board, any new people would be in the swim of things instead of missing the introduction in October. So I don't know if we want to have a motion to put it off until November so that we have that. We don't have the poor people, starting off without hearing it. Just a thought.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to have much choice in that matter because it just may show up. I mean, the best we could do maybe is postpone it to hear it, further down the road. But Mr. I'll get a hold of Jerry and see when we've got more specific timeline on that.
It's on the calendar for October.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's going to happen necessarily. As soon as it, yeah. Well, I anticipate what's going to happen is that staff will receive the recommended changes. They will make recommendations. We'll then have public testimony. Then we'll have an issue response situation. And then we will deal with the issue responses like we've dealt with them in the past. I'd anticipate that's how it's going to happen. And this doesn't happen overnight, believe me. It's a it's a slow, painful process, I tell you. But I would anticipate that we won't be dealing with it in just one session. It's going to be multiple sessions. And we need to take our time with that thing because this is going to impact everything that happens in the municipality for the next 10 or 15 years as far as development. So
that's why I thought maybe we might want to hold off until November when we, if any potential changes to the board happen in October, then those new people would start with the new.
Who's up this year? You are? Miss P? I am? I think, okay. Okay. I don't keep track of that stuff. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll know. Yeah. Yeah, I think, maybe what we ought to do is put in our, if we want to stay on board, we probably ought to put in our applications early and get a decision early. That would, so we know, because we serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and so, you can be on that slippery road and not know it. But I think it's good. Let me talk with Jerry about that and see what we want to do. Okay, any other stuff?
Can we find out when our terms end? At one time we had that information, and I don't know when my term ends. I'm hoping it's going to be soon.
Here, I've got a up-to-date thing here.
I do too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, Mr. Phelps, 2012. Yeah, I am 2011. How about that? So is Connie, and so is Nancy. So everybody else doesn't have to worry. So 6 of you will have been around for sure for this thing. But let me ask them how we want to handle that thing. But I agree. We don't want to have totally new people dealing with this. Yeah. Okay, any other discussions? Okay, let's have a motion to adjourn. Looks like it's done by Mr. Parks and Mr. Frederick seconded. Any objection? We're out of here.
She'll let you in.